Welcome back to Lean Into Leadership, where we lead the conversation about anything and everything leadership related. On today's episode, Nolan Kamoo joins the show. Welcome back to Leadership in 20. We have another great episode planned for you today. Brandon here. I'm joined with
Mello here. And Nolan.
And we're going to hop into this one. I think Mello's got our first question for Nolan today. Here we go.
All right, Nolan. So the first question for you is, who are you?
Yeah, so I think I'm kind of defined a lot by, what I've been involved in and the different, activities I participated in. When I first got to CMU, my biggest involvements were through the Leadership Institute with the Leader Advancement Scholar Program. That's where some of my first few friends were. That's kind of how I got, the jump into starting other stuff. And then my other big involvement was with the Student Government Association. I started early on in the Senate. I served as the Senate leader through my freshman year, and then my sophomore year, I served as the Senate leader as well as the College of Medicine senator, so representing some of those students over there. After that, I decided to take a step back from SGA. I got a little bit more involved in Greek life, so I was part of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and I also joined the Interfraternity Council in the middle of my junior year, and then through my senior year. I served as president of both organizations, and I think that was one of the spots where I really learned to grow and get a lot of the skills that kind of helped me, carry over to the teaching side of what I'm doing, studying to be a social studies teacher at the secondary education level.
Okay. That's awesome. I mean, super involved throughout your collegiate career. Were you super involved in high school, or how did that kind of happen? Did that start in college for you? And talk about that. How did you get involved so much?
Yeah, I was definitely a stereotypical case. I was very involved in high school. I played a couple sports. I was involved in what we call Student Congress at the time. I also was involved in my own class's government. I served as one of our class presidents. So I was super involved. I liked the student advocacy piece. That was kind of a big part of what I really enjoyed about high school, is listening to other students and then advocating for them, whether that be to the administration, community at large, or whatever it might be. And then I think transitioning over to college, while I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to be involved in at first, I knew that I wanted to be involved, so I kind of started in the places that I knew best. Student government in high school, want to do student government in college, and then also I joined the club swim team really early on. I was a swimmer all throughout my life, and so those were kind of the two spots. I said, hey, I'll start here. This is what I know the most, and then from there, I kind of grew. I was adamant against joining Greek life pretty much for definitely the first few months that I was here on campus, but ultimately I landed in a fraternity that I really enjoyed and helped me grow a lot personally and professionally, and I kind of learned a lot more than simply maybe what the media tells you about that whole world.
So I got a question for you. So what was your favorite leadership role that you've mentioned just now?
Yeah, so I guess one that I haven't mentioned has been Leadership Safari. That was definitely my biggest involvement here in the Leadership Institute. I would say that one for sure has been, I don't know, it's hard to pick a favorite, but one of my favorites definitely. I think there's really no other position on campus that is so involved at really a professional level of working with other people and having such a long-term commitment to plan a conference. There's a lot of moving pieces on any campus, but especially with the program that involves so many different departments, so many different professionals, and working with students and family members and all those things. It was hard. It was hard learning that field at the beginning and kind of understanding higher education is different than a lot of other spaces. And I think it took me a few months to kind of get into that, okay, here's what's expected of me, and here's what I expect of other people. But I think after I was able to pick up on that, I was really able to kind of move forward. And those skills were really transferable. All the things I learned in planning a large-scale 1,000-person plus conference with Leadership Safari transferred over to the work I did in the Interfraternity Council, in my own fraternity, whether that was, crisis management, long-term planning, event things, simply communicating with people and figuring out, hey, you got a lot of different personalities, a lot of different backgrounds. How do you bridge the gap between being a leader of so many different people, considering, myself, I only come from my background, and that's the only experience I've lived through.
I got a question on that, too. You kind of mentioned jumping into that larger role for your leadership development through Safari. You kind of mentioned the first couple months were a little bit of a struggle to kind of adjust. what kind of held you together during those months of struggle so you could kind of persevere into growing and developing into that more well-rounded leader?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think both in leadership safari as well as any other position, it's the people you got around you. I had a really supportive, partner in Madison, and I had a great staff to kind of support me through that, answer questions, and kind of facilitate that. At the end of the day, right, the learning's got to happen on your own, but just having the people there to vent those frustrations to, or talk about, hey, I'm thinking this, what are you thinking? How can we solve this problem together? I think made a world of difference, and kind of seeing, hey, maybe Madison's kind of having the same thoughts that I'm having. We're struggling in the same ways, or maybe I'm struggling in a way that she's not, and she can support me there, and vice versa. I think makes a life-changing difference. The worst part about being a leader, I think, is feeling lonely and feeling like you're really on, your own little island trying to figure things out. And sometimes it does feel that way, regardless if it's true. But leaning back into the support systems, I think, helped me a lot, and that's both in the workplace as well as taking time to just relax and hang out outside of the workplace. I think made it more of a natural environment. I've known Madison for a long time, all throughout college, but even then we were both in a brand new role, and so it takes some adapting to get used to that, and it's a large scale process, as I mentioned. But ultimately, like I said, leaning back into, hey, what can I help you with and what can you help me with, so we both feel supported, makes a world of difference. And I think, like I said, that's transferable all the way outside of just leadership safari. The people you surround yourself with, whether that's your executive board, whether that is mom, dad, supporter, family member, friend, no one can do anything on their own. Even if that's just moral support, it does go a long way to kind of rejuvenate you and, take a step back, and it's like, all right, let's attack the problem again in a new way.
That's awesome.
I would agree with you. With two things you said is like, yeah, sometimes you do feel like you're alone as a leader in that situation. But even seeing you and Madison over the summer, I've seen a lot of chemistry between you guys, and just how y'all was just such a go-getter thing, and she boosted you up and you boosted her up, and I seen that firsthand. So I thought that was pretty cool, seeing y'all just basically be the dynamic duo to put on a whole program for these incoming students. So, even if, like I said, I'm not saying that people are searching for recognition, but I recognized you guys during that time. I do appreciate y'all, because it made it fun for me just seeing y'all put everything together. And I'm like, man, they really doing this. Like, two college students really putting on this whole program. So
yeah, and when you talk about having a staff, right, of 20-something core staff members, and then over 100, staff members at a general level, it's hard to meet everyone's needs. I would say it's impossible. Like, not everyone can learn the best from me. Not everyone can learn the best from Madison or whoever it might be. But simply having two people in there to bounce off each other, and, hey, when one person doesn't connect, hey, step in and help me out a little bit, I think goes a long way. It's really, really tough having two people, or having a professional staff, I'd say, and being able to support essentially 200 staff members. It's extremely difficult. Everyone needs something different and at a different time, and you simply can't be there for everyone at the same time. But recognizing, hey, I'm not the one connecting with this person right now. Madison, can you help me out? Like, would you mind going to talk to them, or back on, some of the other professional staff members, goes a long way. As soon as you start thinking, hey, everyone's my vibe, if that makes sense, or everyone can learn from me in the same way, that's when you start failing and you're losing people, because they don't, they just don't, respond to that. And that's not like a good or a bad thing. It just is a fact of life.
All right, Nolan. So question number 2 is, why do you believe leadership is so important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I consider that the $1 million one, right? Nobody knows the answer. It's different per person. But I guess a little bit of my thoughts and kind of engaging in that sort of stuff over the years. Leadership is a fulfilling spot for me. I get personal fulfillment from it. I feel fulfillment when other people feel fulfilled. But ultimately, to me, it is about other people. And I think the positions I've had kind of emulate that. With Leadership Safari, you're welcoming in incoming students, students who don't really have any idea what's going on and are trying to kind of find their way and find some sense of, hey, I know one or two people. And then with Greek life, right, no matter what you hear about it, you don't really understand the full experience until you're in it. But a lot of people, they turn to that spot for their community, and I think that's valid. It's a really awesome space to be in. It's not for everyone, but it's an awesome space for people who can find a community there, and that's really the big buzzword. we know that community is the way that students feel welcome on campus, welcome in any organization, and the reason they stay. And knowing that, I think that's got to be our focus in any organization. So any way that I can help people find community, I think is not only fulfilling, but the most important thing you can do. If I can have people come into Greek life or come into Leadership Safari and think, hey, this, however small, had a positive impact on me, that to me is a job well done. And, there's a bunch of different ways that can be facilitated, and I'm not the only one to facilitate that. In both cases, I've had a team of people all around me who have been able to also buy into that and support that journey. But ultimately it comes down to, the importance of leadership resides in the fact that you build community for other people. And while, no leader's perfect, you also encourage other people to take on those leadership roles. A lot of people, think, hey, that person did it, so maybe so could I, right? And part of leadership is building that network of future leaders and passing down that knowledge and what and how you operate so that the next leaders can be even better. When leadership's done right, the next safari is better, or the next group of Greek life members is better and better and better. So, 10 years down the line, you're miles ahead of where you were when you started. I think a true, strong leader is able to pass on that knowledge and put people in a position to be even more successful than they were. I have someone that I know that I've worked with always says, if the next group is super successful or wins that award or, whatever metric they have, that means you did your job the year previously because you were, part of passing down that knowledge, and you were one of the building blocks of the many years that it takes to become really successful in something.
I would say I resonate heavily with everything you were saying, and I think that's why me and you connected so well, because everything you just said is what I believe as well. And even you two are one of my closest peers here, and I feel like y'all had an extreme impact on me being peers. At one point I was in your fraternity and I enjoyed myself, and I learned a lot from you out of everyone, but one thing that you really said that I really like is just making other people feel like they're a part of something, making them feel like they can do it too, making them feel like they can be a leader, or they're a part of a community, or they're important, or one little thing you do has a strong impact on them. And that's something that I strive for, and clearly that's something that you strive for, and I strongly believe that that's why we connected so well at that time period. So yeah, I really like that answer to that question, because I feel that. So
No, 100%. I think you touched on such an important key piece to leadership, right? It's about leading others, but building leaders, right? And again, too, I think there's a lot of cases we see in college where, there's an amazing leader in an organization or somewhere, and they leave and it falls apart after they leave, right? And, sometimes that's not fully on that leader, right? Because things happen. Sure. But at the same time, though, it's like, okay, if we pull back and reflect, did that person spend time mentoring and leading others, right? And I think that's pretty common. I mean, I want to pick your brain on this too real quick. Sure. Because you talked about the idea of creating community and facilitating that, which is so important. Has there been anything that you've tried that hasn't worked? And what'd you learn from that?
Yeah, like a million things, right? I guess I kind of believe, right, if from the outside it looks like someone's always successful, you're simply not seeing all the times they failed. Like, especially in a post-COVID world, it's constantly throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, and what doesn't, you change. You're constantly pivoting. There's specific to Greek life, recruitment's definitely been down post-COVID, and we're not like a super heavy involved Greek life school. But even with that, so that's one of our main areas that we've tried to address. There's been a ton of things we've done recruitment-wise, whether that's events, tabling, whatever it might be, that they just don't click. And it's super easy to get down about that type of stuff because we fail a lot on that. But the stronger approach is, hey, that doesn't work, push it to the side. What's a new thing we can try? And that was a lot of like my term as IFC president when I was assisting with recruitment and all those things. That was everything we did. We figured out new ideas, new kind of ways to engage the community. Some worked, some didn't, but at least we know now whether it works or not. And that doesn't mean that something that didn't work now can't work in 10 years, but at least when we pass down that knowledge, we can say, hey, we tried this idea. It didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. maybe you try it again, but you make this pivot here. You don't know this kind of stuff until you try it out. And that's specific to Greek life, and there's some member development stuff we did there. But the same is true for Leadership Safari and just about everything else here on campus, right? We're all facing budget cuts, personnel losses, a lot of things that make it more difficult to do our job effectively. And that doesn't mean that we can. It just makes it, more important to pivot. And whether that's with Safari, getting very creative with the programming we wanted to do, completely changing the curriculum, which we did this past year. We made a lot of changes that were really tough, and not all of them worked, but a lot of them did. And so you put that information together, and that's what I think builds your quote-unquote institutional knowledge. You got to pass that down over and over and over again to kind of build those things. But not every curriculum change we made worked. We went over it, Brandon knows, 12 million different times, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, and maybe stuff in our first draft that wasn't in the final would have worked better. Who knows? But the important thing is we tried something new and we figured something out. And taking those leaps is important a lot of the times. And I'm not saying constantly take leaps. Sometimes you do got to be safe. But by the same token, this is college. This is not life or death. Almost every organization has the capacity to make changes or try new things and not completely fall apart. Yeah. And to Brandon's point earlier, if you're completely falling apart, that's more of a testament to, you got to look intrinsically of, hey, am I not preparing people to handle these changes? Was I not good enough with the information? Was I not preparing people with how to support me when we're making these changes? And I that's certainly an area where I feel like is the biggest thing I need to work on, because I've very much been if I want it done, I'll do it myself. And I'm still learning to trust people. And college is a beautiful space there's plenty of people to trust, and there's plenty of people who will probably let you down. And that's just the fact of life, and probably the rest of life will be that way too. I'm projecting, but who knows? But you know what I mean? Are you going to stop there, or are you going to take that and be like, wow, that sucks. All right, what's the next thing we got to figure out?
One thing I actually wrote down one day, and I was just trying to think, can I make this make sense? But it was failing is trying is doing is creating, creating is succeeding. So to an extent, every time you fail, you succeed. Like somebody told me the other day, Thomas Jefferson or something had 1,001 tries before he got the light bulb.
Light bulb thing.
He could have gave up on 1,000 try. I don't know if that's true or not. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes history gets bent, but whether it's true or not, metaphorically, that's true. You can try 1,000 times, and you could be ready to give up, but then you try one more time, and that's the golden stage. Right.
And very rarely is there a right answer. You know what I mean? Right. Many things can work. I think there's this constant belief that we got to find the right answer. We got to find the best way of doing it. Yeah, ideally we do want to find the best way, but looking at the numbers, right? What's the probability that you are going to find the best, most effective way to run your organization? Unlikely. You probably are only in your term for 1 year, or you're only here for 4 years and evolve. Yes, do the best you can, but also remember your job is to be at least a little more effective than the last people. If you get to that point where you think that you have been more effective, you've done your job properly. I feel like a lot of leaders are hard on themselves because they're constantly stuck in this idea of it's got to be better, it's got to be better, it's got to be better. And I'm certainly one that believes that too. But sometimes you got to step back and, I did a good thing here, and this is valuable. And as long as we can pass that value on and not walk backwards, it's better than before. Yeah. Not everything's going to be, I don't know what they say, roses and sunshine or whatever.
That's what I always say, suns and roses.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit more of a pessimistic person about that type of stuff, but the reality is always, it's never amazing, it's never horrible. It always sits in the middle, and a lot of people don't like that because it's a little bit more boring than they'd like to imagine, but leadership's not a pretty place to be. It's a hard thing to do, and it's
hard.
Messy, and you're in the trenches, I guess is probably the best way to describe it.
I think every guest we've had has said something along that road. It's I think even now, even with being in this podcast and it being quote unquote, I guess, ran by the Leadership Institute, I would say, leadership is kind of glamorized to an extent, but it's hard. It's very hard. You have to make tough decisions and do stuff that you might not want to do, or anything really, or like you said, walk alone, or how do I say it? Like, I mean, you got some input on that because I'm kind of drawing a blank,
Yeah.
but
I mean, 100%, right? I think like leadership's a choice, right? We know that too. But when it comes down to ethical leadership, it's about leading all the time, right? Not when things are always good. And if you're only leading when things are good, then I'm sorry, you're not a leader, right?
Yeah.
You have to make those difficult choices, those decisions, which can be really challenging. But I think there's a lot of potential growth and positivity in those challenges, right? You think about anything that's been challenging in life. It's you've either gone through that through decisions. Have they been the perfect decision? I don't think there's such thing, right? To your point you just said, right? And I kind of laugh at that too. I'm very similar in that way. Like, how do we always get better, right? Which isn't a bad thing. In balance, it's good, right? But it's like when you really think about it, we don't know the perfect program or decision because like, guess what? We only know what we know, right? We could make it even better after we found the perfect thing, right? And so, but again, it's about that trial and error. Innovation is so key. And like you said, try new things. I would say 100%.
And I mean, the one thing that I've tried to do in all my leadership positions at the beginning is sit down and kind of say, hey, where can we be creative? Where do we need to stay where we're at? Right? Because like I said, you can't experiment with everything. It's too much liability sometimes for organizations to experiment with everything. But it's about recognizing, hey, this needs to stay constant. It's too much to risk at this moment. These things we can experiment with. Maybe those things that you think now they got to be hard and fast. 2 years down the line, they're like, no, we can experiment here. We're a little bit more safer, right? You do got to protect the organization to some extent. But if you never identify, hey, what are those things where we can experiment? You never really know. Either that or you are going to experiment with something that you shouldn't. And you're going to maybe make a mistake. Not that the mistake's bad, but the choice that kind of led down that mistake wasn't the best one at the time. So it comes down to planning. I mean, a lot of people don't love planning. I'm not the biggest fan of it either, but it's necessary. If you don't have a game plan going into anything, you don't know what to evaluate yourself on. Like, how do we know if we did the good job or if we messed this up? We're not evaluating against any prior knowledge that we have or projections that we might have done. So, to some extent, it is a numbers game. Numbers look different in every org, but
yeah,
it's true. There's got to be metrics.
For sure.
Yeah.
You've dropped a lot of wisdom today, but I want to know what's one key piece of leadership advice you want to share with the viewers, or maybe something you wish you would have known, kind of starting your college journey or while you've been developing your leadership.
Yeah, two things come to mind. I think thinking about my journey, I did a lot of leadership in high school. I came to college and thought, hey, the best thing I can do for myself is be super involved. There's nothing wrong with being involved, but I think a lot of people, especially kids, in LAS, because a lot of them are that more stereotypical model, burn themselves out. And you get to a point when leadership isn't really fun anymore and being in stuff isn't fun. And, I always tell people, is it better to be on 6 organizations or is it better to love one? Right? This is your life and you got to value it. And this is a mistake that I've made, certainly, is I got super involved really early on and burnt myself out to the point where I had asked myself, what am I really doing with my time? Like, yeah, I'm in all these organizations, but how is that serving me the way that I need to, right? You're here for 4 years, and then after that, you got to figure it out from there. So get involved, but don't get involved for the sake of, I was involved in high school, let me keep doing it. Yeah. There's got to be passion there, and if there's not passion, you're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to care as much as you think you should, and that in and of itself is a disservice to other people who, are maybe more passionate about that. The other thing I was going to say, too, is you don't have to be a leader in everything. Just because you're a leader in some things doesn't mean that every spot is right for you. And usually, and I'm certainly guilty of this, too, the people that try to lead in one thing that they're really passionate about and go and lead in another thing simply because they think they know leadership are always the ones who aren't liked in those organizations. Because instead of recognizing, hey, I'm really passionate about it, here are my ideas, that's why I want to lead, I've done leadership a lot before, I can probably handle this. Never a great philosophy. Yeah. And people don't trust those types of people. They trust the people who are super passionate and they have more respect there. So be a general member in one organization and be the president of another. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a negative thing. You can always lend a hand without being in a position. Leadership is not positional. Well, I mean, it is positional, but not only positional. Yeah. And so you can be a general member and be the most help to the president. You know what I mean? That's just the fact of the matter. The people who have the good ideas always come out, no matter what position they have, their title, their year. Good ideas always come to the surface, no matter what.
Love that. Essentially breaking it down, quality over quantity, right? With your
100%.
involvements and what you
100%.
do. Mello, you got any last things to add here?
No,
You feeling good?
Nolan ate it up.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, that's all the time we have for you today here on Leadership in 20. Mello, Nolan, it's been a pleasure. Great nuggets dropped of leadership. It's been awesome. We'll see you next time. Again, if you have a story that you want to share, you can find a form to kind of fill out some information down below in the description. Nolan, thank you for being here so much.
Thank you for
That
having
was
me.
awesome
I enjoyed
to
it.
do.
It was a
You
good
killed it.
conversation.
It was always a good conversation. You crushed it.
I appreciate it.
So, alrighty, we'll see you next time on Leadership in 20. For now, keep leading the way. Peace out.